Good evening, I'm Cynthia Ng. Our top story for tonight: Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping have concluded their highly anticipated summit, offering a reprieve in trade tensions with agreements on tariffs and rare earth exports. That and more coming up on AWANI International. U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping appears to have agreed to a temporary trade truce following a 1.5-hour meeting in South Korea. The deal rolls back several tariffs and retaliatory measures between the world's two largest economies. According to Trump, China will suspend some export limits on rare earth metals for a year. The U.S., meanwhile, will have fentanyl-linked tariffs on Chinese goods, cutting them from 20% to 10%, bringing down the overall levy on Chinese exports from 57% to 47%.
I've agreed, as you know, I put a 20% tariff on China because of the fentanyl coming in, which is a big tariff. And based on the statements today, I reduced it by 10%, so it's 10% instead of 40%, effective immediately.
While China has agreed to delay the introduction of rare earth export controls, the pause affects rules announced on October 9th, which expanded the country's export regime to include new materials. However, restrictions introduced in April remain in place. These still cover 7 key rare earths, including magnets essential for automakers, defense firms, and chip makers.
U.S. President Donald Trump held his talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping, their first in 6 years, as an amazing meeting with outstanding decisions made. Beijing's official readout was, however, more vague, saying only that the two sides had reached a consensus to resolve major trade issues.
I thought it was an amazing meeting. He's a great leader of a very powerful, very strong country, China. And what can I say? It was an outstanding group of decisions, I think, that was made. A lot of decisions were made, too. There wasn't too much left out there.
Other announcements from the meeting include Trump saying China has agreed to resume purchases of American soybeans and other agricultural products. Beijing pledged to work with Washington on the future of TikTok's US business, but stopped short of confirming a deal. On Nvidia chips, Trump said they discussed a lot of chips, though not the most advanced Blackwell models. He also confirmed Taiwan was not part of the talks. The White House says Trump is expected to visit China in April, with Xi scheduled for a return visit to the United States in 2026.
U.S. President Donald Trump has signaled a possible shift in U.S. nuclear policy, saying the country will resume nuclear weapons testing for the first time in more than 3 decades. The surprise announcement came on Thursday, minutes before his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea.
Trump made the announcement on his Truth social media account, saying he had instructed the Department of War to conduct nuclear testing on an equal basis with other nuclear powers like Russia and China. China has doubled its nuclear stockpile over the past 5 years, from about 300 warheads to an estimated 600, and Trump warned Beijing could catch up with Washington within 5 years. His comments come days after denouncing Russia for testing a nuclear-powered torpedo and a new long-range missile. Trump offered no details on how nuclear tests would be carried out, only saying the process would begin immediately. The United States has not conducted a nuclear weapons test since 1992, when a moratorium was put in place at the end of the Cold War. Trump acknowledged the destructive power of nuclear weapons, but said modernizing the U.S. arsenal was necessary.
Stay with us, more updates coming your way right after the break.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Welcome back. In the Netherlands, the centre-left D66 party has made big gains in the general election, putting it in the lead to form the next government. Meanwhile, the far-right Freedom Party, or PVV, led by Geert Wilders, saw a sharp drop in support after its record showing in 2023.
With almost all votes counted early Thursday, both the D66 and PVV are projected to win 26 seats in the 150-seat parliament. Exit polls had earlier pointed to a narrow D66 victory, but final tallies showed a stronger than expected performance for Wilders. Still, the D66 recorded the largest gains, nearly tripling its seats and putting leader Rob Jetten on course to become the country's youngest prime minister. Jetten's popularity has surged in recent weeks, driven by promises to tackle the housing shortage, boost education, and address immigration pressures.
At least 121 people have been killed in Rio de Janeiro, just days before the city hosts events linked to the COP30 climate summit. Public defenders say the final toll could rise to at least 132. The police operation, Brazil's deadliest on record, targeted a major gang after more than 2 months of planning.
State police said the raids were designed to drive suspects into a forested hillside where a special unit was waiting in ambush. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva urged coordinated action to tackle drug violence, while United Nations officials condemned the high death toll. Its Human Rights Office said the killings add to a trend of extremely lethal police raids in Brazil's marginalized communities. In response, Rio Security Chief Victor Santos said any misconduct would be investigated, denying any link between the violence and next week's COP30 events.
APEC leaders are meeting in South Korea, and the spotlight is on the high-profile meetings and power plays. But behind the headlines is a quieter story: how Asia-Pacific economies are working together in a divided world, and how trust and technology are driving the region's growth. Haris Ashraf Hasnan reports from Gyeongju.
For decades, trade has been the anchor of Asia-Pacific growth. Today, technology is reshaping that growth story. Yet, as leaders meet for the APEC's Economic Leaders Week, it's trust, not trade or tech, that will determine whether this growth remains steady, inclusive, and sustainable. As host, the Republic of Korea has placed two key issues at the center of this year's agenda: demographic change and artificial intelligence. Aging populations are reshaping labor markets, healthcare, and fiscal system across the region. Meanwhile, AI offers new frontiers of productivity and innovation, but also raises deep questions about energy use, misinformation, and ethics. The proposed APEC AI initiative aims to build trust in artificial intelligence through transparency, accountability, and inclusivity, ensuring innovations remains both responsible and sustainable. And that principle, trust, runs through all of APEC's work. Because APEC's decision unbinding, members can test ideas, adapt, and adopt what works. That model, often called concerted unilateralism, has delivered real outcomes: lower tariffs on environmental goods, smoother custom procedure, and stronger digital cooperation. So as APEC leaders meet in Gyeongju, the real story isn't just about diplomacy or declarations. It's about the quiet work of building trust, the true infrastructure that keeps cooperation alive even in a fragmented world. Haris Ashraf Hasnan, reporting from Gyeongju for AWANI International.
Critics argue that Malaysia conceded too much in the new trade deal with the United States signed during the ASEAN summit. However, founder and CEO of Strategic Council, Hafiz Razali, points out that negotiating with an economic superpower like Washington is rarely straightforward and often demands a delicate balance between principles and pragmatism.
First of all, we don't have the leverage against the US. We have to admit that the US is one of our largest trading partners. It's a global superpower, and a lot of the innovations and research as well as products coming from the West or the global order are actually from the US. So in that sense, that's already a disadvantage when it comes to negotiation. Secondly, also, we do have to understand that the US also has strong presence in Southeast Asia in terms of not just geoeconomic but geopolitical presence as well. So with that, on that note, it's always about how we can negotiate for us to not lose too much and still come to a win-win situation. Although on surface, it may look like we have considered quite a bit of our economic flexibility, but in a larger sense, that's why Malaysia will always have to diversify its market partners, which is what Malaysia is trying to do through the ASEAN Championship. And as we grew to be more diversified, naturally, that's also going to be a hedge against the potential volatility in the relationships with our trading partners. And in this case, it's the United States. But who knows what would happen in the future? And that's why it's always important to be inclusive, which is what the Prime Minister has been trying to advocate for.
Is ASEAN simply dancing to the tune of the world's superpowers, or is the bloc finally starting to set the tempo on its own terms? With the 47th ASEAN Summit concluded, Hafizi Razali, founder and CEO of Strategic Council, shares his take on how the bloc manages regional priorities amid global pressures.
Yeah, under Malaysia's championship, it's pretty clear that our direction has always been on the principle of ASEAN centrality. What that means is our priority would always be on what can we get best out of our relationships with our trading partners. And that has always been the focus of our negotiations and our output-driven approaches. And I believe that will continue to be the way for ASEAN because now there is a growing realization that geo-economy and geopolitical considerations are intertwined. And hence, even with the suggestion from the ASEAN Geo-Economic Task Force yesterday, you would have to align both your bilateral and multilateral priorities so that as you engage at the regional level and global level, you would have to come back to your first base principles on what would be best for ASEAN.
As global energy markets face volatility and geopolitical tensions, Southeast Asia must chart its own course, securing affordable power while moving toward cleaner energy. At the Singapore International Energy Week 2025, discussions are focusing on how ASEAN can stay resilient amid global disruptions. Farhana Sheikh reports from Singapore.
I'm reporting from Singapore International Energy Week 2025, where discussions continue to center on energy security and the geopolitics shaping Asia's energy future. With tensions from the war in Ukraine to the US-China rivalry, ASEAN faces growing pressure to navigate the global transition without getting caught in the middle. And in a region still heavily reliant on energy imports, IEA Executive Director Dr. Fateh Birol says it's not just about producing more oil and gas, but about reading the market right.
What these countries in the region can make is the making use of the current and upcoming lower energy prices, both on oil. Look at the oil markets. Since 1.5 years, we were saying that we will see a significant surplus in the oil markets, and this will push the prices down. We get some pushback from some quarters. Why IEA is saying this? What is the issue? And today, despite so many political tensions around the world, Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, major economic trade wars, oil prices are still $60. Exactly what we said. So the region can make use of this low oil prices and low energy prices reading the market.
Even as new sanctions threaten to shake up global energy markets, Fateh says the fundamentals remain steady, with oil prices holding around $60 a barrel.
The energy outlook may be steady for now, but ASEAN knows volatility can return fast. For the region, the goal is to stay resilient and be ready for what's next. I'm Farhana Sheikh reporting from Singapore for AWANI International.
That report wraps up AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the strategies and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more updates, visit international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. I'm Cynthia Ng. Thank you for watching and good night.